Hello and welcome to Cornish Walking Trails. Today we're at Wilcoats. We are going to tell you the most tragic story by somebody that got caught up in some tragic fanaticism and ended up murdering her brother.
An account of a most horrid murder committed in the town of Redruth on Thursday evening, the 4th of March 1824, on the body of a lad about 7 years old named Benjamin George. The murder was committed by his sister Amey George. She's the daughter of Benjamin and Mary George of that town and about 21 years of age.
When we read this story, we were left thinking, well, why? Why would an older sister kill her younger brother? What on earth motivated her? So we are walking down towards St Agnes Head. It's kind of between St Agnes Head and Trevornance Cove. National Trust have got a car park here. I don't think they've even got a car parking monitor in there, have they?
I don't think they have.
One, actually.
No, it's quite a popular place to come. It's a good place to watch the waves coming in, isn't it? We're on the north coast of Cornwall, and it's quite exposed here as well, isn't it?
In the winter it's exposed. In the summer everybody throngs up here to watch the sunset, don't they? Because it faces kind of southwest.
They do.
Or northwest.
And we're going to join up with the South West Coast Path, aren't we? And we're going to walk down the coast slightly.
Towards Chapel Porth.
Yes, that's where we're going.
And we're going down there to find one of the most iconic mine stacks. It's photographed so much, isn't it?
It's
Wilcoats.
Iconic of Cornwall, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's as Cornish as Cornish pasties. It's where we're heading today. It's actually been shown on the TV before. Yeah, lots of these programmes where they've come to Cornwall, they've been here. It's even featured in Poldark.
Filming location.
Yes, yeah, and I actually think this story we're telling today could have literally been lifted from one of the books about Poldark.
Great story for you today, but we'll tell you a bit more of that in a minute. Love things like this. In Cornwall these days it's as if all the old dilapidated buildings have been scat down and redone, and it's such a rare find, and it always makes me smile when you see one like that, because I just have that little grain of hope that maybe one day I could own that and convert it and have this sea view. Of course it's never going to happen, is it, Andrew?
It's not, is it? I'm just wondering how old that is. It looks like it's been there for years and years and years, doesn't it? I mean, I wonder, do you think it might have been there for 200 years exactly? Because that's how far back we're going with today's story.
1824. The story we're going to tell you today happened in a town 4 or 5 miles away from the coastline here. Actually happened in Redruth. St Agnes and Redruth, their histories are pretty similar. They had large mining communities. Our story took place 200 years ago in 1824. There was a young girl aged 19 called Amey George. That was her christened name. She went by the name of Amey George, and she worked in the local mines. She lived in Redruth in a poor tenement. So it was in a house of multiple occupancy. There were several families in that house. In the January of 1824, she started to attend revival meetings for the Methodist religion. And she was a convert. She went to these meetings regularly, and they were quite intense. They lasted for hours, sometimes days. And they were very, very influential. The preachers that held these meetings were like rock stars of their day.
So quite near here there's a place called Gwenup Pit, and Gwenup Pit is famous for a Methodist preacher that went by the name of John Wesley. You might have heard about him. Big in the 1700s, started the whole Methodist movement, and he actually found that the actual inhabitants of Cornwall, a lot of them in the poorer mining districts, were actually really open to the ideas of what he had to say. about how to live their life and to be a good Methodist.
The type of people attracted to his message, their kind of profile was generally of the more poor spectrum of society. The Church of England, with its beautiful quaint little churches, were attended by the clergy, obviously, the local squires and gentry and the well-to-do, and the poorer folks kind of didn't feel part of it. So when John Wesley swept through Cornwall preaching his message, they were almost an open book for him, and thousands attended his meetings, and Gwenup Pit was full. It's an open air pit of concentric circles in an old mine, and the place would just be full. So this book was written in 1978 by David Mudd, who was an MP in Cornwall for many years. I think he was in the Redruth Falmouth constituency. So he knew quite a bit about the Campbell and Redruth area, and this book focuses on it. And he's got a very interesting bit about John Wesley in here. He says that John had already reported that local reaction was enthusiastic. Although he was suffering from colic, John found at Gwenup near 2,000 hungry souls who devoured the word of reconciliation. Half my audience were tinners from about Redruth. Most of the gentry were just before me and so hemmed in that they could not escape. And it was kind of speculated that the gentry was there just out of curiosity, really, as were a lot of these people. But he did say they were hungry souls and they were ready for a new message. And it landed with a lot of people. And he said that the poorer people, seeing the squires, the mine owners and the tradesmen in the established church, regarded it as the church of the rich. By comparison, the simplicity of Methodism seemed more akin to a church for the people. This was not something that the authorities were happy with. It didn't sit well with them. And they were very conscious of the influence of John Wesley, which is why they were probably at Gwenup at one of his meetings to find out what it was all about. So a bit later on, after John Wesley had passed, the message was picked up by different preachers. You had little schisms of the Methodist Church that broke away. One of the most popular preachers in Cornwall was called Billy Bray. He built 3 chapels in the Truro area, another heavily mined district in Cornwall. This is the type of chapel that Amey George would have attended. Billy Bray was like a rock star. He was called the dancing preacher, very charismatic, always had a witty retort for everything, and you can imagine these people being treated like rock stars. They were very influential. The preachers that came down to Cornwall with a message of salvation were welcomed, and like that quote said, there was hungry souls for salvation because their life was hard, and the thought that they would end up somewhere better was so appealing.
If you're enjoying our video, don't forget to like, maybe leave a comment, and subscribe for more videos about walks and days out in Cornwall. So what has all that got to do with our story today? What has a God-fearing community done in 1824? Well, we go back to our young lady who's 19 years old that attended these meetings. She was greatly influenced by them, and it led to her committing murder.
This is a tragic tale. So Emma, or Amy as she was known to members of her family and her friends, she committed murder. She actually murdered someone in her family. She actually murdered her brother, her younger brother. He was only 6. He was called Benny.
This was actually recorded in the Times on April the 6th, I believe, something like that. There was a headline that ran across the newspaper about sensational fanaticism.
Yeah, it got into the local papers as well, and some of those still exist, and it helps us to piece this together so we can understand what actually happened. I find stories like this really interesting.
Yeah.
I like the legends, you know, the tales about old Cornwall and some of the places you can still go and visit which would have been part of those stories, isn't it? But a story like this is really tragic. It was a real story. It involved a family at the end of the day. it also involved some of the elements of Cornish history, things that went on at that moment in time, isn't it? I mean, I've had a good read of this story. I actually find it quite moving, this one. I think there's actually a lot of sadness in this story.
Well, as a mum, you know, the thought that one of your children would murder a sibling is difficult. I find that really difficult to compute. So we really need to understand why, don't we? And I think to help us do that, we need to just walk to Wilcoats.
Yes.
And explain a little bit more about what she was thinking, maybe.
Amey worked in a mine in Redruth, and she probably started working there as a child.
So today, oh, you're taking a photo. Yeah, everybody does, don't they? It's what everybody does here, isn't it, though? Everyone takes a photo. We spend our leisure time looking at these old industrial buildings and going, wow. But I bet people would have walked this path to get to work.
I know, nowadays we look at it and say, oh, what a lovely place to work, and it with a lovely view. But I should imagine the life that they had here was incredibly hard, isn't it? Very long hours.
8-hour shifts, wasn't it?
These mines didn't stop, did they? They worked all day, all night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Women, children worked above ground, didn't they?
So the women were smashing up rocks all day to try and get the lumps of ore smaller so that they could then go in the stumps and they could extract all the minerals. And the men went below ground, didn't they?
and also the youngsters as well. When some of the boys, when they got a little bit older, they went down as well, isn't it? And incredibly hard life. They would have seen a lot of tragedy here as well, because there was lots of mining disasters and things like that, wasn't it? And it was all about getting that ore out the ground and getting it sold.
Yeah, and that's it, wasn't it? It was the be all and end all.
Yeah.
You may have seen these pyramid-shaped hats, and they are actually to cover a mine shaft so that you don't fall down them anymore. I mean, when we were kids, they were just open. There wasn't a grill over them, and there definitely wasn't any barbed wire around it. And I'm expecting to see an open shaft. They do leave some open these days for bats.
Most of the shafts have all been covered over these days, haven't they?
Yeah, the ones that are left open like this, it's generally because they might have a little colony of bats in there. So these shafts, yeah, we're right close to the edge of the cliff here. And what happened was they sunk a vertical shaft that went out under the sea. The galleries went out under the sea to follow the load of the tin and the copper. And they were always in danger of flooding, of the sea breaking through from above, and from the runoff of the land just filling them up with water. It's quite a dangerous life, really. Is that a chaff?
Yeah.
On the other side of the shaft?
Yeah. See if I can film it in a minute.
Okay, I'll give you the camera. Wow. Wow, we're about 10 foot away from it.
Beautiful bird.
Oh, he's so privileged. His mate's a bit further down the cliff. How wonderful to see a chaff. Got a bit distracted there. Anyway, like I was saying, when we were kids, these mine shafts were just open. And how does it relate to our story? Well, Amey George worked at a mine, and she had these strange thoughts in her head while she was watching the children near the shaft, that she would just grab one and throw them down the shaft, and of course that would kill them. And it was the precursor to what she then did to her brother.
Bit of a weird notion.
What's that?
Do you fancy going down there? No? Go on. Oh, there's people there. They would have seen me do it.
And that's exactly why she didn't follow through, because she was afraid that someone was going to see her grab a child and chuck him down the shaft.
They've gone now. Come back. Come back.
No! So this would have been the entrance door, and out the back, I expect on the flat bit at the back, would have been where the beam went out
over and down into a shaft. So the shaft must be the other side of this building. And there would have been a Cornish engine, steam-driven engine in here, wouldn't there?
Lots of these mines went out under the sea, didn't they?
Yeah.
Incredible.
So we're going to go and head down now to the one that's right on the cliff that everybody photographs.
This whole complex here is called Wheel Coats, and where we're going down to now, it's the mine engine house that's actually on the cliff path. It's really dramatic. It's called Town Roath, or Town Roath, I think
Something
it is.
like that, yeah.
Built in 1872. It was a pumping house, pumping engine, and it was tin mining at that stage, is what they were doing here. I wasn't filming when it made the noise, but there's...
I was looking up because I thought I heard another chuff.
You did, it's up there, I can see it. It's right at the top.
Where the beam would have come out.
Yeah. Right up there.
Wow. I do get so excited seeing them.
Almost like they really like it here, isn't it?
How much did you pay them to come into shot then?
I know, you know, I brought them with me today. They're trained chuffs. It's what they do.
Right, so we take this path now down to the other engine house, which I adore. You can just see the chimney. I honestly cannot tell you how many times I have visited this site, but every time I see that engine house, it takes my breath away.
It's an incredible building, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially we've got quite a calm sea behind it today, isn't it? And the sea as well, there's different colours in that sea.
It's extraordinary, isn't
And
it?
I think the red brickwork of the chimney just shows off. It just looks beautiful, doesn't it?
Everything about it just sings, doesn't it? It just pops.
So just picking up our story again, Amy's life in the mine would have been very hard. She would have probably worked 6 days a week. And the Methodist message enraptured her from the January.
So by March, Amey is really heavily influenced by the Methodist movement. She's attending a lot of meetings. Her mother goes to get her one evening late at night and she's in such a dishevelled state. She's lost half her clothes. Her shoes are no longer on her feet. And she takes her home thinking, oh my goodness, what's happened to my daughter? Her character has changed. Neighbours notice change in her as well, and they don't find that she's the happy-go-lucky girl anymore. She spends a lot of time praying fervently that her parents will convert to Methodism as well and be saved. She desperately wants to go to heaven.
The account that we read from earlier goes on to say, she has lately been convinced of her sins under the revival or reformation of the Spirit of God. Revival meetings were common in this period and lasted for days, and Amey desperately wanted her parents to convert and for them to go to heaven. The following day she went to work, but she could not control the thoughts she was having.
Around midday she went to get her dinner from the boiling house. While there she recollected having seen a little boy, a stranger to her, standing by the engine house near the mouth of a pit, and regretted not having taken the opportunity to seize him and throw him down the shaft.
On that evening, her mother left her in charge of her 6-year-old brother, Benny. They shared some supper, and she said to Benny, "Should you like to go to heaven, dear?" He replied, "Yes, when I die." She then took a handkerchief or a scarf and tied it round his neck and literally hung him on a hook. She walked out the door to a neighbour. They were living in a tenement, so there was 4 or 5 families in this one building. And she went to see Francis Hodge, her neighbour, and she confessed what she'd done. They went running to see if they could save poor Benny. They got him off the hook. They cut the neck off his scarf, but it was obvious it was too late. Poor Amey had actually murdered her own brother.
She said, "I hanged my brother. I hope he's in heaven, and I hope to be there soon with him, and then we shall be happy."
Play spot the difference.
I think you might have been here before.
I think I might have been here before. Anyway, going back to our story. So poor Amey, she has probably been working in the mine with her parents since she was about 8 years old. It's a hard life. And she's susceptible. She's only 19. She probably hasn't matured enough to form her own thoughts about life. She works 6 days a week, hard work in the mine, and she spends 1 day a week on Sundays in church. The message from John Wesley and the Methodism movement speaks to her. She's influenced by it. And for a moment, I think she loses perspective. She thinks she can send her brother to a better place. And she acts upon a really bizarre thought. All sorts of kind of things that are attributed to her, that she has a derangement, that she's gone mad, all of these un-PC terms today. But she seems to have had some sort of psychotic episode that she leaves go of her senses and just murders her brother. But I think she does it from a place that she wants to send him to heaven, which is better than the hell she's going through on earth. Amey was tried for the murder of her brother on the 1st of April in Launceston, and it was basically, did she commit murder or was she not of the right mind, and it wasn't actually murder. And it says that throughout the trial, Amey herself seemed unable to answer or say anything in her defence, and sat there with an apparent lack of interest about anything that was going on. After evidence had been given in court, she fainted and had to be taken outside for fresh air. As she came round, she struggled so violently, she screamed, and she was just in so much distress that it took 6 men to lead her away. Once they were in the street, she proceeded to shout and scream loudly for about a quarter of an hour before she calmed down and the hearing could resume. The judge actually spoke to the jury and suggested that maybe Amey was not well, and that instead of committing murder, she was actually, as they would term it back in those days, deranged or mad. So instead of being convicted to hang, she actually ended up in Bedlam or Bridewell, one of the two, we aren't quite sure, in London.
If you're interested in the story and you actually want to read it for yourselves, the full story of this, it's actually written up in this book, which is a fairly modern book. You can probably find it online, I would have thought. It's called Cornish Murders, and there's a chapter in here, and it's called Should You Like to Go to Heaven, Dear?
So this book ends at the court hearing, but Andrew has found out a little bit more.
So whilst I was reading up about this, if you go online, I actually found that all of these records about the trial are actually held in the National Archives, which are in Kew, which is really annoying because it's not in Cornwall.
We can't get there, can we?
It's not online either, but it does tell you online what is actually held there, and there's enough clues in that because there's letters from physicians, it's got dates on it, and it does give you an idea. And from what we can ascertain, 13 years went by. As Sarah said, she was actually sent up to London. She went to, I think it was called Bethlem, was the hospital there. It was also called, or nicknamed, Bedlam, wasn't it? And there's some
awful accounts, isn't it? We all know about Bedlam, yeah.
But eventually, it was decided after 13 years that Emma was well enough to leave, and her mum was called Mary. Her Mary wrote to the doctors there and said that she was willing to have Emma back in the house again, and she returned home.
So the bit about this story that sends, there's 2 bits about this story that sends shivers down my spine. Firstly, what we alluded to earlier about how, as a mum, how can one of my children kill another? And the second thing is then, as a mother, how do I take back that child into my house who's killed another child?
Yeah, and you know, you talk about a long time ago, isn't it? And mental illnesses weren't, but they weren't really understood, were they? They knew that people in their terms would go mad.
Yeah.
But would they then willingly take a mad person back into their household? Because there was always a risk that they would do it again.
Well, I think with hindsight and today's methodology, you can kind of understand that madness can be temporary. It can be a psychotic episode. And I would like to think that poor Emma was under the influence and her perspective was distorted through the preachings, and she just got caught up in, took too many steps towards trying to send her brother from this awful life to heaven that she saw as the most wonderful place to be. So I think after 13 years of the proper influence and education, she could probably see the error of her ways and would never do it again.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's literally, it looks like she was brainwashed, wasn't it, from the preachings?
Yeah.
And she acted almost out of kindness, I suppose.
I think you could see it that way. I mean, how do you think of it? I mean, is this just us looking at it from a modern day, and that she was actually just a disturbed young lady and basically evil and killed someone? I don't know.
So was she mad, or was she bad? Or was she neither? You decide. Let us know what you think. We only have a limited amount of time to research our vlogs. We obviously try and put a vlog out every week. I find this really interesting. If there's anything you can add to this, please feel free. Pop it in the comments. I can't find anything more about this after Emma returns home. So I don't know when she died. I don't know where she's buried. I don't know any more of the backstory. But if you can add more, because I know people do like to read the comments, feel free.
Oh, and one thing, if you are going to research this, we think that it's not Amey spelled A-M-Y, it's Amey spelled A-M-E-Y. Yeah. And that's her baptised name. Emma was just a nickname within the family. So if you did want to look at anything, it'd be Amey George, somewhere in the Redruth area. But we're not quite sure.
Yes, yeah. That's a starting point for you anyway. Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to head back to the car because we're losing the light. It is November. And we will say goodbye until next time.
Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.